Hey everyone, welcome back to Bear It In Mind. This video is an exam paper walkthrough of the 2022 Paper 2 exam paper, specifically Section C, the Research Methods topic. In a previous video I gave an overview of the paper with some general tips and advice for Paper 2, so do check that out if you haven't already done so, and you'll find links to the exam paper and mark scheme in the description below. Remember to pause the video and have a go at the questions yourself first, looking for the command words, topic and marks available before I walk you through it. Before we dive into the research methods section, one of the most important points to scoring well on this section relates to your application of knowledge. Very often students know and understand the research methods content that the exam question is asking, but do not answer the question they have been asked. Most notably, in applying their knowledge to the research methods scenario they are given in the exam. So perhaps the one piece of advice I can give you that will make the biggest difference to your grades in research methods is the phrase, "in this study." In fact, why not write it in big letters at the start of the research methods section so you don't forget? At some point in the research methods section of the exam, and sometimes more than once, there is a detailed description of a scenario or study. What is written here really matters and is not random. It's been carefully thought about and contains lots of information and clues that you will need for later questions. So before you even start answering a question, you want to annotate this scenario as much as possible. Let's read the scenario together, and I'll pause to make comments and annotations as we go along to show you what I'm thinking, and then we can explore the questions. A controlled observation was designed to compare the social behaviours of preschool children of working parents and preschool children of stay-at-home parents. So firstly, we need to note that it's a controlled observation. When I read that, I'm first thinking about the different types of observation: controlled versus natural, covert versus overt, participant versus non-participant. And secondly, I'm thinking about the strengths and limitations of observations: high control but lack ecological validity. I'm also thinking about what makes an observation, such as behavioural categories, event and time sampling, as well as inter-observer reliability. What I'm trying to do is get my mind making connections and recalling information ahead of any questions they may ask. We also see in this first sentence what the focus of the observation is: social behaviours, such as how people interact, play and communicate. And I'm also noting that it's with children, so there's potential ethical issues here. Now, none of these things may come up later, but right now all I'm doing is annotating what I'm seeing and anticipating what I could be asked. The sample consisted of 100 children aged 3 who were observed separately. Half of the children had working parents and the other half had stay-at-home parents. So here we have two groups, so an independent groups design. When you spot the design, start thinking about the strengths and limitations. So a strength of independent groups design is that there are no order effects and there's reduced demand characteristics. The limitation is that there are participant variables. The observation took place in a room which looked like a nursery with a variety of toys available. In the room there were 4 children and 1 supervising adult. Their behaviour was not recorded. I'm noting that there are 4 children and another adult in the room because that could become an extraneous variable later on. Each child participant was brought into the room and settled by their parent. The parent then left to sit outside. Each child participant's behaviour was observed covertly for 5 minutes while they played in the room. Now we have more information about the observation besides a controlled observation. It can be covert or overt, it can be participant and non-participant, and here we're told it's covert. The observation was conducted in a controlled environment and a standardized script was used when the children and their parents arrived. I would annotate and comment on it being a standardized script, but seeing as this relates to question 9, I'll unpack it there. Question 9. Explain why the researcher used a controlled observation and a standardized script in this study. 4 marks. The command words are explain why, and carefully note that you need to write about 2 things as indicated by the word and. Firstly, we need to remember what a controlled observation and standardized script are, and then secondly ask ourselves, why are they used? Why are they important? The opposite of a controlled observation is a naturalistic observation, where, as the name suggests, the observation takes place in a natural setting. In contrast, a controlled observation is much like a laboratory experiment in the sense that the research has much more control over the different parts of the research, including what they manipulate and change. In terms of a standardized script, the word standardized simply means to keep things the same, so the wording of the script that will be used for each child will be the same. And why are they used? Well, the answer for both is that they increase control of variables, specifically extraneous variables that could affect the results. Now, the question does not ask about what they are, but why they are used. So we could write something like this. A controlled observation and a standardized script are used to increase the level of control over the variables in the research to stop extraneous variables influencing the results and making it harder to draw conclusions about what has caused any effect. Now, at this point, whilst everything you may have written there is correct, there's something crucial missing. Do you know what it is? It's the all-important last phrase at the end of the question. In this study. Did you notice it? So what we need to do is take our knowledge of a controlled observation and a standardized script and apply our answer to the question. So we could write, a controlled observation helps to reduce extraneous variables which may have an impact on the social behavior of the children. A standardized script will provide a high level of control to ensure that the greeting the child and the parent receive doesn't affect their behavior. For example, if the greeting varied in terms of how positive and calming it was to each child, this might affect their behavior. Both of these help the researchers to conclude whether or not preschool children or stay-at-home parenting affects social behaviours rather than some other factor or variable. Question 10. Identify one limitation of controlled observations, 1 mark. The command word is identify, so no need to describe or explain. Don't overwrite your answer, just state it. We have already thought about this when we annotated the scenario at the start. It lacks ecological validity, or you could say it cannot be applied to everyday life. Question 11. The researcher used 2 trained observers to record the social behaviours of each child during the observation. Give 2 behavioural categories that the observers could have used in the observation to assess the preschool children's social behaviour. Explain why your chosen categories are appropriate. 4 marks. Firstly, the command word is give. Again, this means just like state or identify, no need to write more. Behavioural categories are the operationalised, clearly defined behaviours that the observer is going to look for and record during the observation. They need to be observable, measurable, and specific. So you need to simply name any 2 appropriate behaviours relating to social behaviour that a 3-year-old might show in the nursery room. And because it's social behaviour, it needs to be about interaction between children. So this could be things like the child smiles at another child, the child sharing toys with another child, the child talking to another child, the child snatching a toy from another child. But there's a second part to the question with the command phrase explain why. You now need to explain why your chosen categories are appropriate, which is a slightly funny question, but what it's testing is your understanding of observations and why they have behavioural categories. You obviously are going to want clear behavioural categories that are distinct and don't overlap. So you could write, these behavioural categories are appropriate because they are focused on how the child socially interacts and behaves with the other children in the nursery room. They are also objective and clearly identifiable for the observer, where they are clearly different from each other. Question 12. Describe how the observers could use time sampling to record the social behaviour of each child during the 5-minute period. 4 marks. The command phrase is describe how, and historically, questions relating to time sampling have been very poorly answered by students. So if you can really understand how to answer this question, it will help differentiate you from other students. As a reminder, there are 2 ways of recording what you observe in an observation, known as event sampling and time sampling. Event sampling involves counting the number of times a particular behaviour, the event, occurs in a target individual or group. I know, how annoying that it includes the word time there. Time sampling, on the other hand, is where an observer records behaviour at a prescribed interval. For example, they record the behaviour that is occurring every 30 seconds. It's also helpful when you see the word how to think about it practically. If you imagined yourself in the scenario right now and you were about to observe the 3-year-olds in the nursery room, how would you do time sampling? You want to break it down into a step-by-step procedure like a recipe. So you could write, record the child's behaviour at set time intervals during the 5-minute period, for example, every 20 seconds. At each 20-second time interval, tick or mark one or more categories from the behavioural checklist that you observe the child showing. For example, if the child is smiling and chatting to another child, the observer should tick smiling at another child and talking to another child from the list of behaviours. Importantly, behaviours observed in between the time sampling frames, i.e. in between each 20-second mark, should be ignored and should not be recorded. For example, even if a child is sharing their toy after the 20-second time interval, this behaviour should not be recorded. Question 13. Explain one strength and one limitation of using time sampling for this observation. 4 marks. The command word is explain, so for 4 marks it's helpful to think about 2 marks for a strength and 2 marks for the limitation, but also take care to note once again the last phrase of the question, for this observation. So this question is testing more than just your knowledge of research methods because you've got to apply to the question. So you could write, one strength is that time sampling may be easier to manage because there are likely to be many social behaviours occurring throughout the set observation time, which with event sampling would be very difficult to record. One limitation is that time sampling may not be representative of social behaviours, as some social behaviours that 3-year-old children may display may be missed. For example, a child may be playing on their own when the observer is noting the behaviour, but then sharing their toys or talking to another child outside of the set observation time frame. Note once again the careful application of the knowledge to the scenario in those answers. Question 14. Explain how the reliability of the controlled observation could be assessed through inter-observer reliability. 4 marks. The command phrase is once again explain how, and as I said previously, when you see how questions, it's sometimes helpful to imagine yourself actually doing the study. So imagine that you wanted right now to observe the social behaviour of the 3-year-olds in the nursery room and check the inter-observer reliability of the observation. How would you do that, step by step? This is a common 4-mark question on reliability that has a pattern to it. Just make sure to apply it to the study where you can as you go along. So you could write, the 2 observers use the same behavioural categories. They observe the same behaviour or event, i.e. the social behaviour of the children in the nursery room. They record the behaviour of the same child at the same time over 5 minutes at the 20-second interval mark, but they do it separately. They compare their results statistically to see how similar they are. They need a correlation coefficient of plus 0.8 to be considered reliable. It's helpful to think of all the S's to help you. Notice it's the same behavioural categories, observing the same event at the same time, but they do it separately, then do a statistical test to check how similar they are. Question 15 says, identify an appropriate statistical test that the researcher could use to analyse the social behaviour scores in this study. Explain 3 reasons for your choice in the context of this study. 7 marks. For statistical tests, you need to know the 3 reasons that affect the choice of each statistical test, and they are difference or relationship, unrelated or related data, and the level of measurement. You may have learned or used a different version or format of a table for the statistical test, so do stick to that one, but here is one version for you to look at for this question. This is something you want to make sure you have committed to memory. Here you can see the 3 factors, difference or relationship, unrelated or related data, and the level of measurement. Now, just before question 15, we are provided with some more information, which is very important information that is giving us clues. It reads, the data from the observation was summarised by converting the number of agreed observations into a total social behaviour score for each child. The researcher then conducted a statistical test to identify whether there was a significant difference between the social behaviour scores for the children of stay-at-home parents and those of working parents. So, is this looking for a difference or a relationship? Well, helpfully we can see that it has used the word difference here. They were testing the social behaviours of children of working parents compared to stay-at-home parents. Is the data unrelated or related? Well, to figure this out, we need to know that unrelated data comes from independent groups designs, separate groups, whereas related data comes from repeated measures and matched pairs designs, where they're the same and similar groups. Here we can see that there are two distinct groups, preschool versus stay-at-home parents, so it's unrelated. Finally, the level of measurement. The level of measurement is the data they gathered off the participants, which in this case was a total social behaviour score. Nominal data is data that is in the form of categories and frequencies, such as asking your participants to pick what their favourite fast food restaurant is and counting up the number of responses for each choice. Ordinal data is data that can be put in order and ranked, and importantly, as we'll see in a minute, is not a fixed equal interval. In other words, the distance between each unit of measurement is not exactly the same value. Interval data is data that is a fixed equal interval, for example time, height, weight, temperature, because each unit of measurement is exactly the same value. The difference between 10 centimeters and 11 centimeters is the same fixed interval as it is between 15 centimeters and 16 centimeters. So if they have a score for social behavior, this is not interval data because it's not a fixed equal interval like time, temperature, and weight. The observed social behaviours are all different, smiling, talking, etc., which means the data is best treated as ordinal data. If we now come back to the statistical tests table, putting all that together, difference, unrelated, ordinal, the most appropriate statistical test would be the Mann-Whitney U. Please carefully note once again how for each of the reasons I carefully applied them to the question. Without this application, you would only be scoring 4 out of 7 marks. Question 16. Explain one reason why collecting quantitative data could reduce the validity of this study. 2 marks. The command phrase is explain one reason why. Quantitative data is in the form of numerical data. In contrast, qualitative data is non-numerical data, often in written form. And the question specifically asks about validity. This is about how accurately it is measuring what it's meant to measure. So let's think. Why might it be a problem to gather quantitative data in this study? Why might it be a problem to gather quantitative data about social behaviours in 3-year-olds to see how preschool versus stay-at-home parents affects it? Thinking about the limitations of quantitative data at this point will help. Quantitative data lacks the level of detail that qualitative data can provide. Well, why is that a problem? Well, more detail can mean more insight into a person's behaviour. Okay, so applying this to the study, we could write, quantitative data could reduce the validity of this study because it can lose the detail about the social behaviours, which are important to gather because you can only really understand social behaviours in the context in which they occur, not just as a number on its own. For example, a child might have smiled, but it might have been a sarcastic fake smile compared to a friendly smile. Question 17. The findings of this study might have implications for the economy. Explain one or more possible implications of this study for the economy. 3 marks. The command phrase is explain one or more, and this is in relation to a section of research methods often given low priority by students when studying research methods. Implications for the economy relates to money and how psychological research can have an impact on finances, for good or for bad, for the country. Note, it needs to be about the wider financial implication of the study for the economy of the country. In this case, the study is about preschool and stay-at-home parents. So there are a few ways of writing about this. Here are 2. If the results of the study suggest that there was an increase in social behaviour for those children of stay-at-home parents, then this might mean parents may delay returning to work after childbirth until their children start school, which would result in a negative impact on the economy in the short term because they wouldn't return to work. Number 2, in contrast, if the results of the study suggest that there was an increase in social behaviour in children of working parents, then parents may be encouraged to return to work earlier, boosting the economy. Other ways of answering it could have included the cost of providing childcare for working parents, or how it provides more employment opportunities for nursery and childcare employees. Question 18. This study was written up as a scientific report. Describe features of the abstract section in a scientific report. 3 marks. This question relates to what's called reporting psychological investigations. Whenever psychological research is conducted, it is written up in an academic format that includes the abstract, the introduction, the method, the results, the discussion, and the references. In previous exam questions, they have sometimes worded this in a way that has asked for the purpose of one of the sections of a report, but in this question they ask you to describe the features, and for 3 marks you need to include a number of features of an abstract. In other words, what makes the abstract the abstract? Here's what you could write. The abstract is the first section of a scientific report. It's a brief summary of the whole investigation, and it contains a summary of all the parts of a report that include the aims, the methods, the results, and the conclusions, but not the references. Finally, we come to the last question, which is a design a study question, and we're provided with a significant amount of information before the question. A new TV program has been developed to increase positive social behaviours in preschool children. There is a proposal to carry out an experiment to compare the effects of the new TV program and an existing TV program on positive social behaviours in preschool children. A sample of 500 preschool children and their parents is available for the experiment. The parents are given consent for their children to take part in this experiment. The experiment will take place over an 8-week period. Data on the children's social behaviours will be gathered from the parents using a self-report method. Question 19. Design the experiments to investigate whether watching the new TV program leads to an increase in positive social behaviours in the children compared with watching the existing TV program. In your answer, you will gain credit for providing appropriate details of the following: the type of experimental design with justification, a self-report method of data collection with justification, how to control one extraneous variable with justification as to why this would need to be controlled. 12 marks. Design a study questions test your understanding of how to conduct research, and hopefully you've had practice carrying out various investigations yourself using different research methods techniques, so you've got some idea of how to design a study. In this case, you need to think back to any experiments you've carried out. There are 3 important things to bear in mind when answering a design a study question. Number 1, the bullet points are not optional. You must do them. This does mean you don't need to write about things that are not named on the bullet points. Don't waste your time writing about content that the question does not ask for. Number 2, turn each bullet point into a clear heading when you answer it, to make it really clear to the examiner you are answering that part. Number 3, most importantly, notice that this type of question often asks you to justify your choice, which means give reasons for the choices you have made. Because we are designing a study, we need to explain how we're going to carry it out. You must do more than simply state a short answer. There are 12 marks available here. First of all, we write about the type of experimental design with justification. There are 3 options when it comes to experimental designs: repeated measures, independent groups, and matched pairs design. It doesn't matter which one you pick for this question, but whichever one you pick, you're going to need to give a reason. So we could write, an independent groups design would be used where the 500 preschool children would be divided into 2 groups. One group of 250 children would watch the existing TV program, whilst the other group of 250 children would watch the new TV program. The reason for this choice is that an independent groups design would mean that there are no order effects which could influence the results, and there's less chance of demand characteristics because they're only watching one of the programs. Secondly, a self-report method of data collection with justification. Self-report methods include questionnaires and interviews with different subtypes. Again, it doesn't matter which one you pick, but you want to be able to give a reason for your choice. So we could write, a questionnaire would be used to gather data from the parents containing a range of open and closed questions. For example, one closed question would be, have you noticed an increase in positive behaviours with other children since watching the programme? An open question would be, please describe an example of a positive social behaviour your child has shown more of since watching the programme. The reason for this choice is that the questionnaire can be standardised so that all parents are given the same questions. The choice of closed questions enables quantitative data to be gathered, which can be easily analysed, and a few open questions too, to provide more depth of insight into the children's behaviours. Thirdly, how to control one extraneous variable with justification as to why this would need to be controlled. One extraneous variable that needs to be controlled is how much of the TV programme they're going to watch and for how long. This could be controlled by standardising the procedures for all participants in both groups with the instructions that they are to watch the full length of each episode of the programme and watch 3 episodes per week. The reason why this needs to be controlled is that if some children watch more of the programme, this could have a greater effect on their positive social behaviours because it has become more memorable to them and reinforced through repeated viewing. Another extraneous variable we could control is to do with distractions. So we could write, we would need to control the amount of distractions the children experienced whilst watching the TV. This could be controlled through ensuring parents are instructed to remove all other devices from the room and are to watch the programme without another sibling present who could distract them. The reason why this needs to be controlled is that any distractions could prevent the children learning from the programme and miss some of the key parts, which could reduce the likelihood of any increase in their positive social behaviours. That was research methods. I really hope going through this part of the paper has helped you, and I wish you all the very best with your Paper 2 exam. See you in the next one.